Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Callis speaking of sports, and I'm here with Anthony Sorbellini of WestchesterCountyPost.com. And we're here to talk about Jalen Green, the ESPN number one 2020 prospect, who has decided not to go to college, not to go overseas, but he's going to be part of that new G League program for kids like him, where he'll be allowed to make up to $500,000 and not have to worry about going overseas or just working out for 12 months or whatever. Uh, this might change the face of basketball, college basketball. But Anthony Sorbellini, give me your thoughts on Jalen Green and the new G League program where you can make $500,000 a year now.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of in two schools of thoughts right now. First school of thought is that's a great addition for the G League. You know, they're kind of, at least internally, well, we're talking about what I can say in terms from the NBA and everything. We're trying to turn the G League into more of kind of what the minor leagues are for Major League Baseball, to where the G League doesn't really have that. So the NBA is trying to develop a full, kind of quote unquote, if you will, minor league system. But then the other school of thought is college basketball is not in a good spot after coming out like this. I just think of, even looking to a year and a half back, that superstar Duke class with Zion, RJ Barrett. If you have, let's say the top, I don't know, 6, 7, 8-ish, even 5 4-star recruits coming from high school into college as freshmen, and they electively choose to go to the G League for a year to go get that paycheck, and the quality of basketball in the in college basketball is going to be diminished slightly. I don't think it's going to completely blow up the system of college basketball, but college basketball is, and we've seen it especially big time this year. It's meant for March Madness. Yes, you could make the arguments that the superstar Duke freshmen, they lost and everything, but you want to see these guys grow and develop to where the G League is it's going to do that on a bigger scale, where guys don't have to go overseas. They don't have to groom their game overseas, and they can start ultimately getting paid, which ultimately led to the one and dones. I remember watching, and I want to say it was the ESPN 30 for 30 on John Calipari. He's kind of the pioneer over at Kentucky for the one and dones. I remember him. Again, I'm not entirely sure if it was the 30 for 30 documentary on him, but I remember seeing a video interview of Coach Calipari saying that he's going to these low-income, impoverished neighborhoods to go recruit these superstar basketball kids. And he's literally sitting with the athlete, their parents, whatever, saying, if your goal is to get to the NBA, I will get you there. So that speaks to the one and dones, to where a majority of these guys, not that the sole reason they want to go to the NBA is money related, but I mean, they do it obviously for the love of the game. It's what they love to do. It's what they're best at. But I mean, $500,000 to an 18, 19-year-old kid, and if you're supporting your entire family, it's going to go a lot.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's got to be the big attraction. A lot of these kids come from poor backgrounds, and they do want to take care of their family. And LaMelo Ball, I think, went to Australia. R.J. Hampton went to New Zealand. I don't think people really want to do that. And, of course, the pros don't really want to go out there to scout them either. That's an expensive proposition. So I think, generally speaking, this is a good idea. But I'll even go back decades ago, because in the old days, Bill Walton didn't play college ball as a freshman. He couldn't. Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at UCLA, he couldn't. Pistol Pete Maravich, he only played 3 years. He couldn't play as a freshman. And that was specifically so you could be prepared for college life. Now, flash forward 45, 50 years, and of course, it's the opposite. We had guys go right to the NBA for a while, right? LeBron, KG, I think Moses Malone maybe was the first. And I think that also might be in the next collective bargaining agreement, I think 2 or 3 years from now, that might be an issue. But I think you're right. I think this is a good stopgap, if you will, because I think the most important thing for a lot of these kids is to make money. Having said that, I'll give you the other side, which is the and I don't make this a strong defense of the college game, but, Zion became legendary because of his 1 year at Duke.
Hmm.
And Trae Young wasn't even that well known, but he was on TV with Oklahoma 25 times a year. I
Right.
don't know if the G League, I know they show the G League games in New York of the Knicks, but nobody watched them. I know I didn't, and hardly anybody I know. So if you have a Jalen Green, for example, who's got a great rep coming out of high school, are people going to turn on the G League game to watch him? And that, I'm not talking about his decision. He's made his decision. But in terms of people watching, so the college argument is, the Calipari argument is even, come to me, we'll be on national TV every week. We'll be in the tournament every year. We can make a run at the Final Four every year. And that exposure might get you a sneaker contract, for example, as it did for Zion. It would have been interesting if Zion was in the G League making 500,000, what his popularity would have been. But I'm using Jalen Green as the first example. I'm not convinced that people are going to really turn on to watch him and that his brand is going to grow. And even though you don't get money in college, which you should, these guys should be paid, but, you get the full scholarship, et cetera. You do have now a better chance, I think, to make your reputation a year earlier, your freshman year in college, than Jalen Green will in the G League. What do you think about that, and what are your final thoughts on this whole thing?
I definitely agree with you. I don't think the market's really there in terms of watching the G League. I mean, it's the G League's almost essentially kind of an extension of the NBA Summer League. You don't really watch it. But then again, if you look at, Major League and Minor League Baseball, no one's really going to Minor League Baseball games. So this is more of just kind of better competition, guys who are NBA ready, just getting that extra polish on their game to where, if you look at if you're a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and you go to college and you're dominating, you're not really going to gain anything, really, in my opinion, at least. Because where I would see, again, they lost in the NCAA tournament, excluding all that. But I'm looking from each individual superstar talent from each one of those guys, like Zion, R.J. Barrett, on that superstar Duke freshman squad. Zion, RJ, they were completely out-dueling every opponent they were playing. It doesn't matter if they were other freshmen, sophomore, juniors, or even seniors. They were just out-physical, just overall better athletic specimens, better basketball players than those guys. To where now if you throw that opportunity to go to the G League, groom your game even more, I've always been a big proponent for the only way you're going to truly grow yourself is to throw yourself out into the fire, so to speak, and play against that better talent. So going to the G League instead of going to college for that 1 year, you're ultimately going to be a better ball player. But of course, that money doesn't hurt. That money doesn't hurt one bit at all, because like I said earlier, if you're throwing $500,000, hell, if you're only throwing $250,000 to a 18-year-old kid, that's gonna go far. But then you also have to look into, because for college you can't sign your shoe deal, you can't get your endorsements. What's gonna happen with the G League? Can you start building your brand even more? Can you go out? Can you get that shoe deal? Can you do what other stipulations along with that initial $500,000 base salary can you go after? So ultimately, it's gonna be a bit of a change. I would say in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to start seeing the G League develop even more. But this is a great step for ultimately what the NBA wants to do in terms of, growing the brand of the G League and making it a more predominant alternative to college basketball, and just fully growing it to where guys don't have to go overseas and then just groom their game domestically even more.
Well, I think you make a good point. It's absolutely going to hurt college basketball. Just the fact that Jalen Green is not going to be in the college game next year automatically takes the quality down. And it's very interesting because I used to talk about this even when people started going from high school, even when people started going one and done. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would never have spent 4 years in college. Bill Walton would never have spent 4 years in college. I don't think. Now, those guys were smart guys. They're intellectual guys. Maybe they would have. Tim Duncan is the last great guy, and we talked about him in his Hall of Fame video. Tim Duncan is the last great player that I can recall who played all 4 years, which he did at Wake Forest. as he talked about, he needed the college experience because he hadn't played much before college.
Mhm.
But this does open up a whole new thing. It will weaken college basketball. And the question is, if in 3 years or whenever that next NBA collective bargaining agreement takes place, if they make it so you can go right from high school to the NBA, that, of course, will hurt college basketball as well, because there's always going to be those 4 or 5. They don't all always make it, but the ones we remember, the LeBrons and the KGs, they never played in college because they didn't have to, and they could make that money right away because they went to the NBA. So I agree, this is kind of a good mid-level thing to have an opportunity for a kid.
Yeah, Steve, I just have one question for you. Speaking from your point of view as a parent, I'm just curious to know how, say you have, a 4 or 5-star recruit looking to go play college basketball, and this is the alternative. What's your overall opinion and sense of it coming from a parental experience? Again, disregarding the fact about, yes, $500,000. Disregard that fact. I'm just talking about purely in terms of, the ultimate goal is to go play professional basketball and play in the NBA. What do you think is the better course of action in terms from the parent perspective?
I think a lot of it depends on your financial situation. I mean, I was fortunate enough, we were okay. We weren't incredibly wealthy, but we certainly were not poor. And I would encourage my kids to go to college. If you have a guy who's a superstar, I don't know that they'd have to do 4 years. I would encourage them to get that experience. You always have a concern about injury, although apparently insurance policies can fix that from a parental money point of view. But I think for the poorer kids, they're going to jump on $500,000 a year. I can tell you, growing up without a lot, if I could have jumped on $500,000 a year, now I was a D1 baseball player, not basketball, but I played both at Power. And I think education is so important in my family and in many families. But again, if you're starving, if you've got 5 siblings, if you're living in the projects and have no money, and that's a lot of these kids, if you don't have money to fly home at Christmas, and if they give you money, it's an NCAA violation. You got to go and give me the 500 G. So I think it is a decision for some. The example I would use is Grant Hill, whose parents were wildly successful. The father was a pro football player, and and he was at Duke forever. So I think it's a tough call, but I think money will tilt it if you need the money. Mm-hmm. But I would hope education should be, and still is to me, so important that you want your kids to get a college education. And if they're superstars enough to go after 1 or 2 years, but you really push the education at home, they can always go back and get a degree later. And some do. I don't know that a lot do, but some do. And you hear these stories from time to time.
Yeah, I'm just overall curious too about is this completely changes the dynamic of recruiting now, because what's Coach K gonna go in there saying, you're a great player, and secretly, I mean, Coach K doesn't really strike me as the braggadocious guy, even though he can be. But I don't think Coach K is, walking around in these recruiting meetings with parents and these superstar athletes, totally like, I'm the greatest college basketball coach. But what's Coach K or even the other high-profile college coach is going to say now to, I have automatically $500,000 sitting on the table. Do I want to go? I don't want to say suffer, but do I want to go through the pain and suffering of being a college student athlete where, I'm not only practicing 2 to 3 hours a day, workouts, and then going to class, balancing all of that, to where as opposed to it's just, I can just go collect my paycheck, start building my brand, start building my future, and start crafting my game. I'm curious to see what the recruiting angle is going to be moving forward for this.
Yeah, I think the pitch is going to be the college experience, which again, if you're poor and are looking at $500,000, the college experience to me isn't enough. But I think the pitch is also going to be either explicitly or implicitly, how many more millions of dollars do you think Zion Williamson made this year, when he played at Duke for that year, vis-a-vis had he gone to the G League and tore that up, to no national TV every week, to no NCAA tournament? That's going to be the dynamic. That's going to be the pitch. But I'll say it again. If I'm a poor kid, I'm taking that $500,000 because I can do so much with that for my family, for my parents, for my siblings, and I think that's going to rule the roost.
Yeah, and
This is
I
Steve. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, Steve. I just have one more thing.
Yeah.
Just the thing with the G League we touched on. There's not really an audience for it, as opposed to if you go to a Power 5 school like a Duke, a Kansas, Kentucky, all those big basketball schools, to where you're gonna have your whatever 30-something televised games per season. We heard of Zion. People know Jalen Green as in high school. People have known about Zion since his freshman year in high school. So I still think if you have that superstar caliber player, they're going to show up to watch. And that might not be all the time to where you're flipping through the channels and everything and being, oh, there's a Westchester Knicks game on. Let's sit and watch it. But you might know the name and see that, hey, Jalen Green's going to be on. Be like, oh, okay, he's going to be an up-and-coming guy, so let's check it out. So there's going to be, an interesting dynamic between how many people are going to pay attention. But then again, we've touched on it. If I'm a struggling kid coming from a struggling family, that $500,000 there, it's going to be very, really, really enticing to go.
Yeah, very good points. This is Steve Callis speaking of sports, along with Anthony Sorbellini. We'll see you the next time.